12-year-old Nora Finch was the kind of kid who didn't believe in do not enter signs. Growing up on the outskirts of the small, windswept town of Sandview, surrounded by desert hills and abandoned mines, her life was an endless hunt for adventure and mystery. She'd already explored every cave, climbed every ridge, and mapped every odd rock formation within a 5-mile radius of her house. But today, something new had found her. Buzz, her self-built drone, had been acting strange all morning. She'd programmed Buzz to pick up any unusual electromagnetic signals in their surroundings, which usually amounted to nothing more than rusty old car parts or scraps from the town's long-gone mining days. But today, while flying over a remote part of the hills, Buzz had suddenly gone silent. At first, she thought it was just a glitch. Buzz's circuits were temperamental at the best of times, and Nora didn't exactly have access to the latest parts to keep him in perfect shape. She tapped at her tablet, trying to reconnect, but the signal was out. She sighed and started hiking toward the hills, figuring Buzz must have shorted out somewhere along the way. But when she crested the ridge and spotted Buzz hovering motionless, her irritation was quickly replaced by surprise. The drone was drifting slowly in circles around a part of the cliffside that seemed to shimmer oddly in the light, almost as if something was buried in the rock itself. Squinting, she realized there was indeed something there, a faintly glinting edge poking out from the craggy stone. Her heart pounded with a mix of excitement and fear. What was this thing? From what she could see, it looked like the edge of some massive, dark metal structure, its surface embedded in the rocks as if it had been here for centuries, or even longer. Cautiously, she climbed down, moving closer. Dust and sand covered most of the strange metal surface, and the metal itself was warped in places, charred in others. Yet something about it seemed alive, like it was waiting for something. Her fingers tingled as she brushed off some of the dust. Underneath, the metal was smooth, almost reflective, and etched with strange symbols and patterns that seemed to shift in the sunlight. Symbols she'd never seen before. "This can't be real," she murmured, barely able to tear her eyes away. Her mind raced with possibilities. Was it a relic of some ancient civilization? Some hidden military tech? She was reaching for her tablet to snap a picture when she noticed something that looked like a panel or a hatch. It was faintly outlined, blending in with the hull, and covered in the same alien symbols. Nora's heart pounded as she stared at it. Her fingers itched to press on it, even though some part of her mind screamed that she should probably run away. "Only one way to find out," she whispered, and placed her hand against the surface. A low hum started, vibrating under her fingertips. The hatch began to glow with a soft, bluish light, almost like it recognized her touch. Before she could pull her hand away, there was a soft click, and the panel slid open, revealing a dark passage beyond. Cold air rushed out, smelling of something old and metallic, with an undertone that she couldn't quite place, something foreign, almost alive. Nora stepped back, eyes wide, adrenaline flooding her system. This wasn't just any wreck, it was something ancient, something long forgotten. She glanced down at Buzz, who was now reacting to the signals inside the ship, his lights blinking excitedly. "Well, Buzz," she muttered, taking a deep breath to steady herself, "guess we're going in." She hesitated only for a moment, then crouched and squeezed through the open hatch. Inside, the passage was narrow and dark, with walls covered in more of those strange symbols. They pulsed faintly in her flashlight's beam, casting an eerie, blue glow around her. As she ventured deeper, her footsteps echoed in the quiet, adding to the weight of the mystery surrounding her. There were pieces of broken glass on the floor, strange machinery embedded into the walls, and shadows stretching endlessly down the corridor. Whatever this place was, it had been here for a very, very long time. Her heart thundered as she turned a corner and spotted a faint, blinking light at the end of the passage. It seemed to be coming from a small sphere lying on the floor. She approached it cautiously, reaching out to pick it up. The moment her fingers touched it, the light intensified, and she felt a jolt of energy, like an electric shock, travel up her arm. The sphere warmed in her hand, and suddenly, the walls around her began to glow. Strange symbols appeared on the walls, flowing and shifting, forming shapes and patterns that almost seemed to tell a story. Her eyes widened as a hologram flickered to life in front of her, its soft blue glow illuminating the corridor. It was an image of an alien, a tall, slender figure with smooth skin and deep, soulful eyes. The alien looked straight at her, a solemn expression on its face, and began to speak in a language she couldn't understand. Just as Nora's mind started to whirl with questions, the words began to shift, slowly transforming into English. "Greetings, young traveler. You have awakened the Astralis, last of the Marani starships. We have waited a long, long time." The alien's voice echoed through the corridor, each word heavy with sorrow and wisdom. Nora's heart skipped a beat. She could barely comprehend what she was seeing. She wanted to ask 100 questions, but before she could speak, the hologram continued. "Our home is gone, our people scattered to the stars. But we have left a legacy here, waiting for one who could listen, one who could understand. Will you listen, young one?" Nora nodded slowly, her voice caught in her throat. The hologram shifted, showing flashes of a world she didn't recognize, landscapes with towering crystals, glowing oceans, cities floating in the sky. She watched in awe, unable to look away. But then the images grew darker. Flames and destruction replaced the beautiful scenery, alien ships firing upon cities, the same elegant alien figures fleeing as explosions consumed their world. The hologram faded, and silence returned, leaving her alone in the corridor. Her mind spun with questions and a sense of purpose she couldn't quite explain. "Who were you?" she whispered to the empty air. But the ship offered no further answers, and the glowing symbols dimmed, leaving her in darkness. Nora's pulse quickened as she stood in the dim corridor of the ancient ship, her flashlight beam barely cutting through the shadows. After a few moments, she took a steadying breath and moved deeper into the belly of the vessel, her steps hesitant but determined. Buzz hovered close behind, his tiny light casting flickering shadows along the walls. The walls of the corridor were smooth and curved, as if molded rather than built, and the strange symbols she had seen earlier appeared here and there, glowing faintly before dimming to silence. The eerie beauty of the alien architecture captivated her, yet she couldn't shake the feeling of something watching her, waiting to see what she would do next. She soon entered a large central chamber. Unlike the narrow corridor, this space was vast, with a high ceiling and walls that seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly blue light. In the center stood a tall, obelisk-like structure, with symbols etched along its surface, pulsing faintly. Around the edges of the room were broken consoles and shattered glass tubes, their purposes lost to time. Nora approached one of the consoles, examining the strange, crystal-like material embedded into the controls. Everything felt so different from human technology, more organic, as if the ship itself was alive. Buzz hovered nearby, his sensors whirring as he scanned the environment. Nora hesitated, then pressed her fingers lightly on one of the console's glassy panels. To her surprise, a spark of light crackled under her touch, and the ship hummed as though reacting to her presence. Symbols began to flash across the console, and she felt a gentle vibration beneath her fingers. The ship's hum grew louder, filling the chamber, and the obelisk in the center began to glow more brightly, casting long shadows along the walls. Nora took a step back, her heart racing. Then, with a hiss, another hologram appeared, this time, more elaborate than before. The alien figure she had seen in the corridor materialized once again, but now she could see more details, an intricate robe-like garment that shimmered with the same symbols she had seen around the ship, and deep, sorrowful eyes that seemed to look directly at her. The hologram spoke, and this time, she understood the words immediately, as though the voice was bypassing language itself and speaking straight to her mind. "Child of the stars," it said, a warm yet somber tone carrying through the emptiness of the ship. "You stand within the Astralis, the last vessel of the Marani people. We have waited countless ages in silence, hoping someone would come. You have awakened us." Nora's mouth went dry, but her curiosity outweighed her fear. Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What happened to your people?" The alien inclined its head slightly, as if acknowledging her question. Images flooded the air around her, vibrant landscapes, Mirani cities gleaming under suns of colors she had never seen, a civilization of peace and beauty. She watched as the alien figure pointed to the images, explaining with a sense of deep sadness. "We were explorers, seekers of knowledge," the alien said. "Our world was filled with light, our skies with the colors of stars. But in our quest for understanding, we crossed paths with others who did not share our desire for peace." The images shifted, becoming darker. She saw warships descending upon peaceful Mirani cities, their gleaming towers destroyed by fire and debris. The Mirani fought back, but their weapons were no match for the relentless assault. She felt the alien sorrow deepen, and her own chest tightened with empathy. "We had no desire for war, and so, we fled," the alien continued. "We scattered across the galaxy, leaving remnants of our knowledge, fragments of our history, in the hope that someday, someone would find us and remember." The hologram flickered, the alien figure's form fading momentarily before stabilizing again. Nora glanced at Buzz, who was recording everything, then looked back at the hologram. "Why did you come here?" she asked. "Why Earth?" The alien's gaze seemed to soften. "We did not choose your world specifically. The Astralice was damaged in our final escape, adrift for centuries upon centuries. And then, we came to rest here, in the soil of this planet, waiting in silence. Waiting. For you." The words echoed in the chamber, filling Nora with a strange mix of awe and responsibility. She was only 12, but something about the Mirani's message made her feel as though this was exactly where she was meant to be. As she stared at the hologram, the light of the obelisk brightened suddenly, casting a sharper glow across the chamber. The alien's eyes widened in alarm, and for a brief moment, its image became frantic, as if trying to warn her of something. "Our systems are failing. If the core shuts down, the knowledge stored within this vessel will be lost forever," the alien said, its voice trembling with urgency. "If you wish to save our story, you must access the core and stabilize the power. But be warned. The core is damaged, and there may be consequences." Nora's heart pounded. Stabilize the power? She barely understood half of what the alien was saying, but she knew enough about circuits and energy sources to make a guess. "Where is the core?" she asked, steeling herself. A symbol glowed on the wall behind her, marking a passageway that led deeper into the ship. "Follow the path," the alien instructed. "The knowledge we hold is fragile, and only you can decide if it is worth the risk." The hologram faded, and the room was left in silence once more, save for the faint hum of the obelisk. Nora glanced back at the passageway, her pulse racing with both fear and excitement. If she failed, she might lose the story of the Mirani forever. But if she succeeded, she would carry their legacy, their knowledge, something ancient and wondrous that had traveled across the stars. Determined, she turned and walked toward the marked passageway, her flashlight casting long shadows on the walls as she made her way to the core. The corridors grew darker and colder as she ventured deeper, and a slight metallic smell filled the air, sharp and unfamiliar. At last, she reached a small door at the end of the hall, glowing faintly with the same blue light she had seen before. With a steadying breath, she placed her hand on the door, and it slid open to reveal the core chamber. In the center of the room was a large, spherical device, encased in what looked like glass, but glowed with a shifting spectrum of colors. The core pulsed weakly, each beat sending a flicker of light across the chamber. Approaching it carefully, she saw a control panel beside the core. It had been damaged over time, cracks running through its surface. Symbols she couldn't fully read flashed on the screen, but she recognized the energy levels. They were dangerously low, flickering in warning red. She examined the panel, running her fingers over the strange controls, trying to make sense of them. She remembered how Buzz had sometimes jump-started her own equipment when the batteries had run low, and an idea formed in her mind. She looked at Buzz and tapped a command on her tablet. "Buzz, I'm going to need a little help here," she whispered. "You're going to have to give it a jolt, the biggest one you've got." Buzz whirred, his lights blinking as he registered the command. The little drone hovered over the core, its energy reserves blinking down as it powered up for the transfer. Then, with a burst of light, Buzz sent a stream of energy into the control panel. The core responded instantly, glowing brighter, pulsing with renewed strength. Symbols raced across the screen, flashing faster and faster. Nora's heart soared with hope it was working. But then, a deep rumble reverberated through the ship. The walls shook, and sparks erupted from several consoles. The lights flickered, and she heard a warning tone blare in the background. The alien had been right, the core was damaged, and the surge had strained it even further. Then, unexpectedly, the core stabilized, its light softening to a steady glow. The rumbling ceased, and the symbols on the panel stopped flashing. Instead, a single image appeared, the Millennia alien, looking at her with what she could only interpret as gratitude. "You have succeeded, young traveler," a voice echoed softly through the room. "Our story will live on, through you." The lights dimmed, and the core settled into a calm, rhythmic pulse. Nora let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She had saved the Astralise, at least, its memory. She felt the weight of the Millennia legacy settle over her, a responsibility she hadn't asked for but now couldn't imagine walking away from. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I promise. I'll keep your story safe." The hum of the Astralis's core pulsed like a heartbeat, filling the silence of the ship's depths. Nora stood by the glowing sphere, her heart racing. The alien had said she'd succeeded in preserving their story, but as she looked around the chamber, she felt there was still so much left to discover. She'd awoken something, but what exactly? Nora's gaze was drawn to another console along the wall. Unlike the others, this one appeared intact, its surface smooth and unblemished. Symbols flickered across it in an endless, shifting pattern, mesmerizing her. The console's light cast a dim glow over the room, creating an almost sacred atmosphere. With a steadying breath, she walked over to it and placed her hand gently on the smooth surface. Immediately, the console sprang to life. Symbols rearranged themselves, forming a single image, a map of stars unlike anything she had seen. It stretched across galaxies, with each star marked by lines of intricate, alien script. Her eyes widened as she realized this was a map of the universe. Or at least, the Millennia's version of it. Fascinated, Nora traced her fingers along the star map. She noticed several of the stars were circled, each one blinking softly. One was brighter than the others, pulsing steadily at the edge of the map. Buzz, who was hovering at her side, emitted a soft beep, as if to say, "This is important." Curious, she tapped on the pulsing star. The map zoomed in, showing a closer view of the system. In its center was a pale blue planet, surrounded by a halo of smaller moons. Nora squinted, feeling an inexplicable tug in her chest as she recognized something familiar. This was Earth, her home planet. The Millennia had marked it on their map long before they'd even arrived here. "How long have you known about us?" she murmured, brushing her fingers over Earth's glowing. But the ship, as always, remained silent. She moved her fingers to one of the other circled stars, and the map zoomed in again, showing a beautiful, crystalline world bathed in blue light, with structures that seemed to float above the landscape. She realized it must have been the Millennia homeworld, the place they had left so long ago. A deep, melancholic feeling settled over her as she thought of all they had lost. The images she had seen in the holograms flashed in her mind: peaceful cities, vibrant landscapes, and the sorrowful eyes of the last Millennia who had recorded their story here. This was more than a ship, it was a piece of history, a monument to a lost civilization. And she was the only one who could carry its memory. As she continued studying the map, another section of the console lit up, displaying a list of words in the Mirani language, along with translations. She realized it was a glossary, a guide to understanding their symbols. The Mirani had left their knowledge here, encoded in the ship's core, just waiting for someone to uncover it. One word in particular caught her attention: Lyrasis. The translation read, "The Eternal Archive." "Is that what you are?" she whispered. "An archive?" As if in response, the star map faded, and a new image appeared on the console, a small, rectangular device lying inside a glass case at the far end of the room. The screen showed instructions in both the Mirani language and English, explaining how to unlock the case and retrieve the device. Nora's curiosity was piqued. She walked over to the case and peered inside. The device looked sleek and simple, like a tablet but with a smooth, iridescent surface. It glowed faintly, as if holding a hidden power. She placed her hand on the glass, and the case opened with a quiet hiss, releasing a cool puff of air. She reached inside and carefully lifted the device, feeling its weight in her hands. The moment her fingers touched it, images began flashing through her mind. She saw fragments of the Mirani's past, their cities, their families, their art and music, their joy and sorrow. It was overwhelming, like a flood of memories all at once. She staggered, nearly dropping the device, but steadied herself, breathing deeply. Once the initial wave passed, she found that she could focus on individual memories, pulling them from the flood like pages from a book. It was a memory core, a repository of the Mirani's knowledge and experiences, encoded directly into the device. She realized, with a thrill, that she was now carrying the collective memory of an entire civilization. But as she explored further, she encountered something different. Among the memories was a locked section, marked with a warning. It read, "Reserved for the keeper. Caution, knowledge within may alter memory, perception, or physical reality." She hesitated. What could be so powerful that even the Mirani had chosen to lock it away? Her hand hovered over the command to unlock the section, a mix of curiosity and fear swirling within her. What if it was dangerous? What if it changed her in ways she couldn't understand or control? Nora took a deep breath. "I came this far," she murmured to herself. "I have to know." She pressed the unlock command. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the device in her hand vibrated, and the room around her shifted. Shadows deepened, colors grew richer, and the very air seemed to hum with energy. She felt a presence, a consciousness, ancient and vast, as though the ship itself was reaching out to her. The images in her mind grew sharper, clearer, taking on a vividness that was almost real. She saw the Mirani leaders, discussing their last desperate measures to save their people, debates over ethics, science, and survival. She witnessed their final moments before the Astralis launched, carrying the last hopes of their race. Then, one image stood out above the rest, a single Mirani, preserved in a glass pod, surrounded by instruments and glowing machinery. Her heart skipped a beat as she realized what it was. The Astralis wasn't just a ship, it was a lifeboat, carrying not only memories but also a single living Mirani, the last of their kind, kept in stasis in the hopes that one day they might be awakened. The device in her hand pulsed, guiding her attention to a faint outline on the opposite wall. She walked over, heart pounding, and ran her fingers along the edges. It was a hidden door, concealed within the ship's intricate designs. With a soft click, it slid open, revealing a small chamber bathed in soft blue light. In the center of the chamber lay a pod, much like the one in her vision. Its glass was frosted over, but she could make out the outline of a figure inside, slender, peaceful, suspended in time. The last Mirani. Nora's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just a memory, it was real. The Mirani hadn't all vanished. One of them had survived, waiting here, in this ship, for someone to find them. For her. She reached out, placing her hand on the pod's control panel. A screen flickered to life, displaying information in both Mirani and English. It asked if she wanted to initiate the revival process, warning that the procedure was risky given the ship's damaged state. Her mind raced. If she woke the Millennia, she could finally speak to someone who had lived through everything she'd only glimpsed in memories. She could ask questions, learn about their civilization firsthand, and understand why they had chosen to leave this record behind. But she also knew the risks. If something went wrong, it could jeopardize not only the Millennia's life but her own as well. Buzz beeped softly beside her, as if sensing her hesitation. She looked down at the little drone, feeling a surge of determination. "I can't leave them like this, Buzz," she whispered. "They've waited so long." With a deep breath, she pressed the command to initiate the revival. The pod hummed, lights flashing as systems began to power up. The glass slowly cleared, revealing the Millennia inside. Their skin was smooth and luminescent, their eyes closed, and a peaceful expression softened their features. The hum grew louder, the lights brighter, until finally, with a soft sigh, the Millennia's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, they stared at each other, the Millennia's gaze filled with a mixture of confusion and wonder. Then, slowly, they lifted a hand, pressing it against the glass. Nora placed her hand over theirs, separated only by the thin barrier. The Millennia's voice echoed softly in her mind, words formed through thought rather than sound. "You are human?" Nora nodded, struggling to find words. "Yes. I found your ship. I found your story." A look of profound gratitude crossed the Millennia's face. They looked around, taking in the broken consoles, the dim lights, and finally, the device in Nora's hands. A flicker of sadness passed over them as they understood their situation, but there was also acceptance. "Thank you," they whispered in her mind, their thoughts radiating warmth. "I am the last of my people. And you. You are the first to know our story. Share it well, child of Earth." With those final words, the Millennia's hand slipped from the glass, and they closed their eyes, their body growing still as the pod's lights dimmed once more. Nora stood in silence, her hand still pressed against the cool glass of the stasis pod. The final Millennia had passed peacefully, leaving behind a profound emptiness in the chamber and a heavy weight in her heart. For a moment, she simply stood there, staring at the pod, feeling a mix of awe, sadness, and responsibility. Buzz whirred gently beside her, his tiny light illuminating the quiet space. It felt as though the entire ship was holding its breath, waiting to see what she would do next. The Millennia's final words echoed in her mind, "Share it well, child of Earth." Taking a deep breath, she clutched the Millennia memory device, the core of their civilization, tightly in her hand, feeling the faint hum of its energy pulse through her fingers. It was more than just technology, it was their legacy, a bridge between the past and the present, and now, it was hers to protect. As she turned to leave the chamber, a tremor shook the walls. The lights flickered, and a low, mournful tone resonated through the ship, almost like a farewell song. The Astrolese was failing, its systems unable to bear the strain of reactivation. She had brought it to life for a brief, glorious moment, but now it was reaching its final breath. Nora felt a pang of urgency. She had to get out before the ship fully powered down, before the hull gave way and the memories of the Millennia were lost forever in the depths of the desert. "Come on, Buzz," she whispered, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. She retraced her steps through the corridors, her flashlight bouncing off walls covered in fading symbols and intricate patterns. The once bright glow of the ship was dimming rapidly, the symbols flickering out one by one, like stars in a dying galaxy. As she neared the entrance hatch, another tremor shook the ship, and a series of warning tones blared. Buzz beeped frantically, urging her forward, and she quickened her pace, climbing through the opening just as the floor beneath her began to crack. She scrambled out of the ship, pulling Buzz along with her, and stumbled into the open desert. She turned back, watching as the Astrolese emitted one final, brilliant pulse of blue light. For a fleeting moment, the entire ship glowed, every inch of its hull radiating a soft, ethereal beauty. She felt as if she were witnessing the Millennia's last goodbye, a farewell to a world that would never know them. Then, with a low rumble, the ship's lights went out, and the entire structure collapsed inward, crumbling and settling into the sand. Silence fell over the desert, the only sound the faint whisper of the wind. The astrolese was gone. Nora felt a tear slip down her cheek, and she wiped it away quickly, clutching the memory device close to her chest. The weight of the Mirani's legacy rested heavily in her hands, but it also filled her with a fierce sense of purpose. "Don't worry," she whispered, looking down at the device. "I'll make sure your story isn't forgotten." The journey back home was long and silent. Buzz hovered by her side, quietly clicking as if sensing the gravity of the moment. By the time she reached her house on the edge of town, the sun was setting, casting a warm, golden glow over the landscape. She climbed up the hill behind her home, where she often went to stargaze, and sat down with the memory device resting on her lap. With a deep breath, she activated the device. It lit up softly, displaying the Mirani star map once more. But this time, as she looked at the map, something felt different. Each circled star seemed to pulse with a life of its own, as if calling out to her. Nora realized, with a shiver of excitement, that she had access to not only the memories of the Mirani but also the coordinates of other places they had explored, other worlds they had touched. She was holding a map of galaxies and worlds unknown to any human, a map that could lead her to pieces of Mirani history scattered across the cosmos. And yet, her task was not just to follow their journey, but to share their story. The weight of this responsibility filled her with a sense of urgency. She looked up at the vast, endless sky, her mind buzzing with ideas. That night, she stayed awake, filling her notebook with sketches of the alien landscape she had seen, descriptions of the Mirani cities and people, and rough translations of their language. She wrote down everything she could remember, carefully documenting the details, knowing that someday, others would need to hear this story too. Over the next few days, she threw herself into her mission. She taught herself how to use the device to access specific memories, immersing herself in the Mirani's world. She watched their daily lives, their art and music, their scientific breakthroughs, and their peaceful philosophy. Each memory was a precious fragment of a civilization lost to time, a window into a world that had been extinguished. She began to build a small library in her room, filled with notebooks and sketches, crafting the beginnings of what she hoped would become a full archive of Mirani knowledge. She carefully mapped out their language, translating their symbols into English so that others might one day understand. She recorded the coordinates of the other circled stars on the map, dreaming of what mysteries might lie on those distant worlds. One evening, as she was writing, her mom poked her head into her room, eyebrows raised in surprise. "Nora, are you okay? You've been so quiet lately." "What are you working on?" she asked, eyeing the piles of notebooks and sketches scattered across her daughter's desk. Nora hesitated, clutching the memory device hidden under her hand. Part of her wanted to tell her mom everything, to share the incredible adventure she'd been on. But she also knew that the story was still hers to shape, hers to protect, at least, for now. "I'm not writing a story," she said finally, smiling a little. "It's about an ancient civilization from another galaxy." Her mom chuckled, shaking her head. "You and your wild imagination." She kissed the top of Nora's head and left her to her work, closing the door softly behind her. When she was alone again, Nora looked down at the device in her hand, a glimmer of determination in her eyes. This wasn't just a story, it was a legacy, one that spanned galaxies and centuries, entrusted to a 12-year-old girl who had stumbled upon an alien ship in the desert. It was a task far larger than she had ever imagined, but she felt ready. In the weeks that followed, she shared small pieces of the Mirani story with a few close friends at school, weaving it into tales of an alien civilization she'd invented. She watched their faces light up with awe as she described the Mirani's floating cities and crystalline landscapes, their songs and art. She knew it was just a fraction of what she'd discovered, but it was a beginning. And as she grew older, Nora's passion for the Mirani story only deepened. She spent years expanding her archive, eventually sharing their history with scientists, artists, and storytellers who helped her bring their memory to life. She traveled the world, giving talks, showing her drawings, and even writing books that recounted the Marani's journey and tragic fate. She kept the memory device close, never revealing its true origin but drawing upon its endless depths of knowledge to keep the Marani alive in the minds and hearts of all who heard their story. One night, many years later, Nora found herself once again on the hill behind her childhood home, gazing up at the stars. She was no longer a child, but she still carried the Marani legacy as fiercely as she had on that very first night. And as she looked up at the constellation where the Marani homeworld had once shone, she felt a warmth spread through her chest. In the vast, silent tapestry of the universe, she knew the Marani were no longer alone.